Kushiel'sDart, Chapter 17. Afterwards, Cecily came to visit and took me out on an excursion to a sanctuary of Nama some miles outside the city, famed for its hot springs. It was strange to treat her as an almost equal after so many years as her pupil, but she was gracious as ever, and any awkwardness soon passed between us. There was a chill to the spring air, but the sun was warm and bright, and it was good to see the pale green shoots of new growth emerging as we drove into the countryside. We were well received by the priests and priestesses of Nama at the temple, and though they were discreet, I dare say they recognized the name Cecily Le Vau Perrin. After all, she said in the bathhouse, shrugging gracefully into one of the robes they had given us, we are servants of Nama, my dear. We may as well indulge ourselves in such amenities as that avail us. The hot springs bubbled in rocky pools, releasing wisps of steam in the cool air. Only a few early flowers bloomed, intrepid and pale, but there was a warble of birdsong giving a promise of summer to come. I followed Cecily as she walked carefully over the rocks, following suit as she slipped out of her robe and lowered her body into the warm, slightly acrid waters. Ah! She sighed with pleasure, settling her submerged form on rocks, long since worn smooth by water, and the luxuriating bodies of innumerable bathers. They say the waters have good healing qualities, you know. Come, let me see. She examined the welts on my back as I turned obediently. Skin deep. There'll be no traces of them in a week. I've heard Childeric de Essoms makes love as if he's hunting boar. Is it true? I thought of him wielding his phallus like a spear and almost laughed. It is true enough, I said. The warmth of the waters was beginning to seep into my bones, filling my limbs with a feeling of lassitude, and soothing the minor pains de Essoms had dealt my flesh into a sweet, warm ache. He has the passion of his fury, at least. Is there aught for which your studies with me left you unprepared? No, I answered truthfully, shaking my head. Lord de Essoms desired little in the manner of art. Others will, she assured me, adding, Phèdre, if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask me. With that, she dropped the matter, and her eyes took on a glint I remembered well from the boudoir gossip of Cyrus' house. Do you think he will ask for you again? Remembering de Essoms' rage, the wild blows of the flogger against my skin, and his breath hot against my neck, I smiled. You may be sure of it, I murmured, tilting my head back to submerge my hair. It fell, waterlogged and silken, down the length of my back as I straightened. He will tell himself it is to beat Delaunay at his game, I told her. But that is only what he will tell himself. Be careful. The admonishment in her voice was stern enough that I took heed, glancing at her. If de Essoms realizes you know what you are about, he will be frightened, and that, my dear, will make him truly dangerous. Cecily sighed, looking of a sudden tired and aged through the wreathing steam. Anafiel Delaunay does not reckon he does, equipping a child of your proclivities with that much knowledge and sending you into certain danger. There were 100 things I longed to ask her, but I knew well enough that she would not answer. My Lord Delaunay knows full well what he does, I said instead. Let us hope you are right. Cecily spoke the words firmly, sitting straighter in the hot spring and looking once more like the prized blossom of Cyrus' house that she had been. Come, we are not too late to join in the luncheon meal, and the servants of Nama lay a fine table at her sanctuary. If we do not dawdle overmuch, there will be time to soak again before we need return to the city. We dined well that day, and made our return to the city before sundown. I made my report to Delaunay that night, and he seemed well enough at ease with it, praising me for doing naught but letting de Essoms swallow the bait of our assignation, hook and all. Tell him nothing, he said, satisfaction in his voice. "And he will tell you something in time, Phèdre, in hopes of priming the pump. It is human nature to give in hope of getting. Lord de Essems will give. It is inevitable." Going to his desk, he took out a small pouch and tossed it to me. I caught it by reflex, surprised. Delaunay grinned. "He sent it by courier this afternoon. A patron gift, towards your mark. It is his will, I think, that the Marquis limn his conquest of you upon your skin as a fair reminder to me. Do you wish to refuse?" The pouch weighed heavy in my hand. It was the first coin of my own I had ever owned. I shook my head. "If it serve your will, my lord, let it be. He was the first." I might have wished for some sign of jealousy were I less of a realist. Delaunay gazed into some unknowable distance, nodding to himself. He was not displeased. "Then let it be. I will make an appointment with the Marquis." And thus began my career as a servant of Nama. A week later, to the day, I had my first meeting with the Marquis. As Cecily had predicted, the wheals marring my back and sides had faded into nothingness in that time, leaving my skin a clean slate for the Marquis's art. Kushiel's chosen heals swiftly. We have need of it. Because Delaunay was Delaunay, nothing but the finest would do for his adepts. I went to the same man as Alcuin, a master of the trade. Robert Teilhard had been at his art for 20 years, and his services came dear. I had long known this would be my case, for Delaunay had paid dear in purchasing my mark. I was not Alcuin, to remember to the last clause and by-law the regulations governing every guild in the nation, but I knew the rules of my own well enough. The Guild of the Servants of Nama does not allow for outright slavery. Delaunay did not own my mark so much as he held it in trust for Nama, but until such a time as I made it, I was indentured into his service. All contract fees belonged to Delaunay. Only patron gifts freely given in homage to Nama could go towards my mark. I spent the first hour in the Marquis's shop naked, lying flat on my stomach with my head pillowed on my arms, while Master Robert Teilhard muttered and round my backside with a pair of calipers, taking my measurements and transferring them to paper. When he was done, I sat up and donned my clothes, admiring the masterful sketch of a part of me I seldom saw. I particularly liked the curve of my lower back, widening like the bass of a fiddle from my narrow waist. "'Tis not for your vanity I do this, missy," Master Teilhard snapped, turning to his apprentice. "Run down the street, lad, and fetch Lord Delaunay from the wine-shop." While I sat waiting on his limning table, he ignored me, fetching out a rolled scroll from its cubbyhole and pinning it up on a cork wall next to my sketch. I recognized Alcuin's mark from its base, which he already bore on his skin, but still I gasped to see the design in its entirety. It was surpassingly beautiful, and I understood why Robert Teilhard had earned the right to be called master. Each of the 13 houses has its own mark pattern, but it was a different matter for servants of Nama not attached to any house. Our marks, within certain strictures, were highly individualized. Of course, the designs are highly abstracted, but a trained eye can pick out the underlying forms, and I soon saw many in Alcuin's. Elegant scrolling at the base suggested a mountain stream, and the slim, supple trunk of a white birch rose upward, a fine pattern of birch leaves twining about it, and crowning it in a delicate spray at the finial. The lines were strong, but the colors subtle. Soft grays and charcoals that would echo Alcuin's unusual coloring, with the merest hint of a pale green along the edges of the leaves. What Master Robert Teilhard designed for me was different. Delaunay entered the Marquis's shop, laughing, bringing with him a breeze of wine and good conversation, but he soon sobered to the task at hand, poring with Master Teilhard over bits of foolscap as sketch after sketch was drafted and refined or discarded. I grew impatient, but he would not let me see until they had a sketch which pleased them both.
"What do you think, Phèdre?"
Delaunay turned to me grinning, holding out the rough design. It was bold, far bolder than Alcuin's mark. With some effort I recognized the underlying design, which was based of a very old pattern, the briar rose. Somehow Master Teilhard had kept the dramatic vigor of archaic lines, yet infused them with a subtlety that spoke at once of the vine, the bond, and the lash. The thorny lines were stark black, accented in only a few choice hollows, with a teardrop of scarlet, a petal, a drop of blood, the mote in my eye. Primitive, yet sophisticated. I adored it. No matter how many visits to the Marquise were required to execute the design in full, to restore it to pristine condition after my patron's untender mercies, it was worth it. "My lord, it is wonderful," I answered him honestly.
"I thought as much."
Delaunay preened with satisfaction, while Master Teilhard set about transferring the design to the master sketch of my measurements, muttering to himself. It was astonishing to see how the lineaments bloomed beneath the sure gestures of his crabbed hands. His apprentice crowded near, craning to see around Delaunay.
"I'll be in the wine shop,"
Delaunay said to Master Teilhard.
"You'll send the boy for me when she's done?"
The Marquise answered with an affirmative grunt, deep in concentration. Dropping a kiss on my disheveled curls, Delaunay waved and departed. I waited, and waited some more, while Master Teilhard copied the design to his very exacting satisfaction. And when it was done, it was time to disrobe again, lying naked while he retraced the base of my mark yet again, checking his measurements with the calipers. The quills scratched my skin, and the ink tickled. He slapped my buttock once when I wriggled, absent-mindedly, as one might reprimand a restless child. After that, I held myself motionless. After a small eternity, the base was outlined. Chin propped on my elbows, I watched as Master Teilhard gathered the tools of his profession, the ink trough and his tappers. His apprentice watched me out of the corner of his eye, nervous and excited. The boy was no more than 14, and I smiled to think of my effect on him. He blushed as he mixed the ink and covered it by bustling about the brazier, heaping it with coal until the Marquis's shop was as warm and toasty as a baker's oven. Master Teilhard snapped at him for it, and he blushed again. I didn't care. Being naked, it felt good. And at last it was time for the Marquis to start limning. As is customary, he began at the base of my spine, at the very knob where it ends, below the dimples of the lower back. I could not see him choose a tapper and dip it in the trough, but I felt it against my skin, the prick of a dozen tight-clustered needles and the seeping wetness of the ink. Then he struck the tapper with his mallet, and a dozen needles pierced my skin, impregnating the flesh at the base of my spine with a dollop of ink black. The pain of it was an exquisite shock. I made an involuntary sound, my hips moving of their own volition to thrust against the hard surface below me, grinding my pubis into the limning table. Master Teilhard swatted me again. "Damned Inquisets," he growled, concentrating on his work. "Grand-Pierre always said they was worse than criers or bleeders. Now I know why." Ignoring his complaint, I held myself still with the greatest of efforts while he continued, tapping, tapping, tapping with the mallet, piercing the lines of my mark into my skin. I savored every moment of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you again soon.